The sound of a single, perfectly tuned crystal flute being set down on a glass tabletop is one of the most exclusive sounds in the world. It's the sound of money. Of old money, of generations of trust funds and Ivy League educations and summers in the Hamptons that blur into one long, golden afternoon. It was the first sound I heard that day, cutting through the low, cultured hum of 200 of my closest family and friends. Or rather, my sister's closest family and friends. I was just the plus one, the charity case, the one who'd married in and then stayed. I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles like tiny pinpricks on my tongue, and tried to find a neutral corner of my sister Eleanor's sprawling, manicured lawn to disappear into. The wedding was a masterpiece of controlled elegance, a symphony in white hydrangeas and blush peonies. Every detail was flawless, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon as if they'd invented serenity itself. It was the kind of day I'd once dreamed of for my own daughter. But life and my sister had other plans. If you're new to this channel, welcome. You've just stumbled into a story about family, betrayal, and the kind of revenge that takes years to simmer. If you know what it's like to have someone you love look you right in the eye and lie, then you're in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on, because what happened at this wedding was just the final public act of a war that had been raging in private for years. And trust me, you won't want to miss what came next. My name is Amelia Sterling Wright. The right part was my husband's doing. The sterling part was my family's cross to bear. We were old New England money, the kind where the family tree is more of a tangled, gnarled oak, its roots sunk deep into soil fertilized with secrets and privilege. My father, Charles Sterling, built a real estate empire from a single brownstone he renovated himself in Back Bay. He was a titan, a man who spoke in contracts and believed love was something you demonstrated with a generous trust fund. Eleanor, my older sister by 3 years, was his perfect heir. She had his ice blue eyes, his ruthlessly sharp mind for business, and his unwavering belief that the world was a hierarchy, with the Sterlings firmly at the top. I was the disappointment, the artist, the dreamer. While Eleanor was analyzing stock portfolios, I was in my room, painting watercolors of the sea. Dad called it a charming hobby. Eleanor called it a waste of potential. But I found my potential in a man who didn't care about the Sterling name. His name was Thomas Wright. He was a structural engineer, a man who built bridges that could withstand hurricanes. He was solid, kind, and he loved me for my messy paint-splattered jeans and the way I saw the world in colors, not spreadsheets. Dad tolerated him. Eleanor outright despised him. She called him a useful tool, not a legacy. She never understood that the bridge he built for me was the one that led me out of the gilded cage of my family. We built a good life, Tom and I. A simple, happy life. We bought a modest but beautiful craftsman home just outside of Boston, a house with a big backyard and a porch that begged for lazy Sunday mornings. We had a daughter, Chloe. She was our miracle. She had my curly hair and Tom's calm, intelligent eyes. She was my entire world. And then my world ended. The phone call came on a Tuesday, a rainy, gray Tuesday that felt like the whole city was crying. There'd been an accident on the Tobin Bridge. A multi-car pileup in the fog. Tom was gone. Just like that. The man who built bridges to last 1,000 years was taken on one in a single brutal moment. The grief was a physical thing, a shroud that wrapped around me, suffocating and dark. Chloe was only 7. Her grief was quieter, a confusion that manifested in night terrors, and a clinging fear whenever I left the room. We were adrift, 2 lost souls in a house that suddenly felt far too big and much too empty. In those first raw, agonizing months, Eleanor was present. She organized the funeral with a chilling efficiency. She handled the paperwork, the life insurance, the mountain of logistical nightmares that follow a death. She would show up at the house with bags of groceries we didn't need, and a brisk, unsentimental air that felt like a slap. "You need to keep moving, Amelia," she'd say, her voice like the click of her expensive heels on my hardwood floors. "Grief is a luxury you can't afford. Not with a child to raise, not with a mortgage to pay." the mortgage. It was the one dark cloud on our horizon. Tom had handled all our finances. He was so careful, so meticulous. But in the frantic, sleep-deprived haze of new parenthood years before, we'd apparently taken out a second mortgage to fix a foundational issue the inspector had missed. It was a variable rate. I didn't even fully understand what that meant until the statements started coming after his death. The payments were skyrocketing. My income from freelance graphic design, which had always been a nice supplement, was suddenly our sole lifeline. And it was snapping. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the one Tom had sanded and refinished himself, staring at the bank statement until the numbers blurred. The payment had jumped again. It was now more than my monthly income. Panic, cold and sharp, crawled up my throat. Eleanor came over that evening. She brought a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. "You look terrible," she said, not unkindly, but as a statement of fact. She poured herself a glass and sat across from me, her posture perfect, her cream-colored silk blouse untouched by the chaos of my life. "It's the mortgage, Elle," I whispered, my voice cracking. I pushed the paper toward her. I don't know what to do. I can't keep up." She glanced at the paper, her eyes scanning the numbers with the speed of a supercomputer. A faint frown creased her perfectly Botoxed brow. "This is untenable. You'll be underwater in a year, less." "What do I do?" The question was a plea. She took a slow sip of wine, letting the silence stretch. It was a negotiating tactic I'd seen my father use. "I'll talk to the bank," she said finally. "I know the regional manager. Perhaps we can restructure it. Get you into a fixed rate." Relief, so potent it made me dizzy, washed over me. "You'd do that? Oh, Elle, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you." She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. "We're family, Amelia. This is what family does. We take care of our own." She gave my fingers a slight squeeze. "But to make it work with the bank, I'll need you to sign a few papers. Just a formality. It'll put me on the loan with you. It shows the bank there's solid financial backing behind it now. It's the only way they'll agree." It made sense. Of course it made sense. Eleanor was a financial fortress. Her name on anything would make bankers fall over themselves to help. I was so desperate, so grateful, I would have signed anything. "Of course," I said, tears of gratitude welling in my eyes. "Anything?" The papers came a week later, a thick stack of legalese. I was drowning in grief, in playdates with Chloe, in trying to scrape together freelance work. I didn't read it. I just signed. On the dotted line. Amelia Sterling Wright. Eleanor stood over me, a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's going to be okay now," she murmured. "I've got you." For a little while, it seemed like she did. The mortgage payments went down to a manageable amount. I could breathe again. I started to paint again, little things at first. A picture for Chloe's room. The view from my kitchen window. The crushing weight of financial ruin lifted, and I felt a flicker of my old self returning. I was even foolish enough to believe that Tom's death had somehow brought me and my sister closer. We had Sunday dinners at her impeccable house. Her husband, Richard, a quiet, perpetually amused man who'd made his fortune in private equity, was always cordial. Their daughter, my niece Isabella, was a few years older than Chloe. The girls were playmates, though Isabella already possessed her mother's regal, slightly dismissive air. Life found a new, fragile rhythm. Mornings were for getting Chloe to school, and then hunkering down with my laptop to find design work. Afternoons were for walks, for errands, for trying to remember how to be a person outside of the label of grieving widow. Evenings were for homework and bedtime stories, and trying not to cry myself to sleep. One such afternoon, I was at the local grocery store, wrestling with a cart that had a defiantly wobbly wheel. I was in the produce section, comparing the price of organic strawberries, when I heard her voice. My mother's best friend, Carol, a woman who'd known me since I was in diapers. "Amelia, honey, how are you holding up?" she asked, pulling me into a lavender-scented hug. "I'm okay, Carol." "One day at a time," I said, the practiced response falling easily from my lips. "You're so strong," she said, her eyes soft with pity. "I was just talking to your mother the other day. She's so relieved that Eleanor was able to step in and save the day with your house." I blinked. "Step in? With the loan, Carol said, oblivious to my confusion. Your mother said Eleanor swooped in like a superhero and took over the whole mortgage for you. What a saint. Not many sisters would do that, especially with how, well, you know how Eleanor can be. The worlds seemed to tilt slightly. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store buzzed overhead. Took over? I repeated, my voice faint. Well, bought it out, right? Carol said, leaning in conspiratorially. That's what your mother said. That Eleanor used some of Richard's money to just pay off the second mortgage entirely and put you on a simple payment plan with her. No more bank to worry about. Such a weight off your shoulders, I'm sure. A payment plan with Eleanor. I felt the blood drain from my face. The papers I'd signed. I thought I was signing for a loan restructuring with the bank, with Eleanor as a co-signer. Not for her to own my debt. To own me. Amelia? Honey, you've gone white as a sheet. Are you all right? Carol's voice was laced with sudden concern. I'm fine, I lied, my voice a thin thread. Just a headache. I have to go, Carol. Give my love to Mom. I abandoned my cart right there in the middle of the produce aisle, the wobbly wheel be damned, and practically ran to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I sat there, in the driver's seat, the air in the car stiflingly hot, and tried to breathe. It's fine, I told myself, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It's fine. She helped me. She's my sister. So what if she owns the debt now? It's still help. It's still family. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it had found fertile ground in the parched soil of my grief. I decided to talk to her, to clear the air, to thank her, properly, for her generosity. I called her that night. Amelia, she answered, her voice crisp. I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait? I talked to Carol today. I began, trying to keep my voice light, conversational. She mentioned something about the mortgage. That you'd paid it off? There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her recalibrating. Yes, she said smoothly. It was the only way to get you a decent rate. The bank was being obstinate. This was cleaner. You're making the payments to me now. It's all in the paperwork you signed. I guess I didn't fully understand, I said, a sliver of shame piercing through my confusion. I should have read it more carefully. You were grieving, she said, her tone softening a fraction. It was the tone she used when she was being magnanimous. It's understandable. Don't worry about it. Just get the check to me by the 1st of the month. We're all set. We were all set, but I wasn't. The conversation should have put me at ease. Instead, it left me feeling unsettled. There was a shift in our dynamic now, subtle but undeniable. I was no longer just her little sister. I was her debtor. The next few months were a study in that new dynamic. The checks I wrote to Eleanor Sterling Vance felt different than writing them to a faceless bank. They felt personal. And she was particular. The check had to be delivered by the 28th of the previous month, not the 29th, certainly not the 30th. It had to be handed to her directly, or left in her home office in a specific, monogrammed tray on her desk. Once, I was a day late. Chloe had been sick with a fever, and it had completely slipped my mind. I got a text message at 8:01 a.m. on the 29th. Amelia. The payment was due yesterday. I stared at the text, my stomach clenching. It was so cold. So transactional. So sorry. I thumbed back, my heart pounding oddly. Chloe was up all night sick. I'll drop it by today. See that you do. The terms are the terms. The terms are the terms. I read the sentence over and over. It sounded like something a villain in a movie would say. Not my sister. I brought the check over that afternoon. Eleanor was in her home office, a room that looked like it belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound books that had likely never been opened, an imposing partner's desk, a Persian rug so thick it swallowed sound. She took the check from me without looking up from her computer screen. Thank you, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. How's Izzy? I asked, trying to inject some normalcy, some sisterly warmth into the glacial atmosphere. Fine. She's preparing for her piano recital. Juilliard pre-screen is next month. She still didn't look at me. That's wonderful, I said. Chloe has her first soccer game this weekend. She's so excited. You should come. Bring Izzy. Finally, she stopped typing. She swiveled her chair to face me, her expression one of mild incredulity. Amelia, I'm chairing the annual gala for the Museum of Fine Arts this weekend. It's been on my calendar for a year. I don't have time for children's soccer games. The dismissal was so complete, so absolute, it stole the air from my lungs. Right, of course, sorry. She gave me a thin, perfunctory smile. Don't be sorry. Just be on time next month. I left her house feeling smaller than I had in years. I drove home, the image of her sitting behind that giant desk, in that perfect, silent room, burned into my retinas. She wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my landlord, my banker, my keeper. The sense of unease grew, fed by 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Comments from my mother. You're so lucky Eleanor is so financially savvy, Amelia. Who knows where you'd be without her? Whispers at family gatherings. I'd walk into a room and a conversation would suddenly stop, replaced by overly bright smiles. My cousin Mark, at Thanksgiving, had had a bit too much to drink and clapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. Don't worry, kiddo, he'd slurred. We all hit rough patches. Good thing you've got big sister Elle to bail you out, even if she does charge a vig. He'd laughed uproariously at his own joke. I'd forced a smile, my cheeks burning. A vig? Interest? Was Eleanor charging me interest? That night, after I'd put Chloe to bed, I went digging. I found the copy of the papers I'd signed, buried in a filing cabinet I hadn't opened since Tom died. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs as I pulled the thick stack out and laid it on the kitchen table. I made a pot of coffee, the familiar ritual doing nothing to calm my nerves. I started to read. Really read. Not the headings, not the summaries, but the dense, impenetrable blocks of text in 8-point font. The language was Byzantine, a maze of whereas and heretofore and party of the first part. It took me hours. My eyes blurred. I had to look up terms online. Balloon payment, accrued interest, acceleration clause. And then I found it. Buried on page 17, subsection D, paragraph 4. It wasn't a loan restructuring, it was a sale. I had not signed papers making Eleanor a co-signer. I had signed a deed of sale. I had sold my second mortgage to my sister for $1 and other valuable considerations. The other valuable considerations were the new, manageable monthly payments I was making to her. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was the clause that followed. In the event of a default on payment by the borrower, Amelia Sterling Wright, for a period exceeding 30 days, the lender, Eleanor Sterling Vance, shall have the right to accelerate the full remaining balance of the principal, or, at the lender's sole discretion, initiate foreclosure proceedings on the property located at 2147 Maple Drive to satisfy the debt. I read it again, and again. The words didn't change. They just got sharper, more cruel. Foreclosure. My sister could foreclose on my home, on Tom's home, on Chloe's home. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling off the chair. This wasn't help. This was a trap. She hadn't saved me. She had secured me. She owned the debt. She owned the sword hanging over my head. And she held the rope. I thought I was going to be sick. I stumbled to the sink, dry heaving, tears of sheer panic streaming down my face. How could she? How could she do this? We were sisters. We were family. I heard her voice in my head. We take care of our own. Is this what she meant? Taking care of her own by holding a financial gun to my head? I spent the rest of the night in a cold, trembling haze of shock and betrayal. The sun was coming up, staining the sky a sickly orange by the time the shock began to harden into something else. Something cold and determined. She thought she had me. She thought I was the same flighty, helpless little sister I'd always been. The artist who couldn't understand spreadsheets. The widow drowning in her own grief. She was wrong. Tom hadn't just built bridges. He'd taught me how to read a blueprint. He'd taught me that to understand a structure, you have to find its load-bearing walls. You have to find its weaknesses. Eleanor had just shown me hers. She was ruthless. She was greedy. And she thought I was too stupid to fight back. I went through the motions that morning. I made Chloe pancakes. I packed her lunch. I kissed her goodbye as she got on the school bus. And then I went back to the kitchen table. I stared at the monstrous stack of papers. And I started to make a plan. The first thing I needed was a lawyer. A shark. But I had no money for a shark. The payments to Eleanor took most of my disposable income. I needed someone who would work on contingency, or for the promise of a future payoff. And I needed someone Eleanor didn't know, someone outside her social and professional orbit. It took me a week of clandestine research, of making calls from my painting studio in the garage where I couldn't be overheard. I finally found him. His name was Julian Croft. His office was in a no-frills building downtown, not the glittering glass towers where Eleanor's lawyers worked. His website was straightforward, no nonsense. His specialty was real estate law and fiduciary malfeasance. The reviews were from little people like me who said he'd taken on the big guys and won. I made an appointment, citing a, quote, potential family property dispute. I brought the documents. Julian Croft was a man in his late 50s, with a rumpled suit, kind eyes, and a mind like a steel trap. He read through the papers I'd signed, his expression growing grimmer with each page. He didn't say a word for a full 10 minutes after he'd finished. He just took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Wright," he said finally, his voice low and steady, "what your sister has done here is predatory. It's not technically illegal, but it is profoundly unethical. She leveraged your grief to gain a controlling interest in your debt. This acceleration clause," he tapped the page, "this is a weapon. She's essentially your sole creditor now. If you miss a payment, she doesn't have to go through a bank. She can move against you directly, and quickly." "So I'm trapped," I whispered, the hope I dared to feel crumbling. "Not necessarily," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a hunter who'd just spotted his quarry. "She got greedy. See this line? Or other valuable considerations?" That's deliberately vague. And this deed of sale, it references the original mortgage agreement, the one with the bank. We need to get our hands on that original agreement. "Why?" I asked. "Because," he said, his eyes gleaming, "if there was a prepayment penalty clause in the original agreement with the bank, and she paid it off early to acquire the debt, she may have violated the terms of her own agreement with you. She represented this transaction as a simple restructuring for your benefit. If she incurred costs to acquire the debt that she's now passing on to you, or if she failed to disclose material facts, we have a case for fraud. Undue influence. We can challenge the validity of this entire contract." It was like a crack of lightning in a dark sky. A way out. A way to fight back. "How do we get the original agreement?" I asked, my voice shaking with a new emotion. Fervent. Burning hope. "We subpoena it from the bank," he said. "But we have to be careful. If she gets wind of this, she'll accelerate the debt immediately. She'll foreclose out of sheer spite. We need to play this very, very quietly." And so began the silent war. I became an actress in my own life. I continued to make my payments on the 28th of every month. I attended family dinners. I smiled at Eleanor. I listened to her talk about her charities, her committees, Isabella's brilliance. I bit my tongue until it bled when she made condescending comments about my little pictures or how I was managing as a single mother. Inside, I was a vault. I met with Julian in secret, in the back booth of a diner halfway between my town and his office. We spoke in hushed tones. He had a paralegal, a fierce young woman named Maria, who started the process of quietly subpoenaing records from the bank. The waiting was agony. Every day, I expected a call from Eleanor, her voice cold with fury, demanding to know why I was digging into our private arrangement. Every time the phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. But the call didn't come. Instead, a different opportunity presented itself. My mother's 70th birthday. A huge party was planned at Eleanor's house. A command performance. Everyone would be there. All the family. All of Eleanor's powerful friends. It was the last place I wanted to be, but refusing to go would raise suspicions. I had to go. I had to smile. I had to play my part. The party was a spectacle of Eleanor's wealth and influence. Valet parking. A jazz trio. Caterers circulating with silver trays of canapes that cost more than my shoes. I wore a simple black dress I'd owned for years. I felt like a ghost among the glittering crowd. I found a quiet spot near the bar, a glass of champagne in my hand that I had no intention of drinking. I was watching Eleanor hold court, my mother beaming at her side, when I felt a presence beside me. It was Richard, Eleanor's husband. He was a handsome man, gone a little soft around the edges, with the perpetually tired eyes of someone who lives in the shadow of a hurricane. "Amelia," he said, his voice warm, "you look well." "Thank you, Richard, so do you." It was a polite lie. He looked drained. He ordered a scotch, neat, and took a long sip. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the party swirl around us. "She does put on a good show, doesn't she?" he said, almost to himself. "The best," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. He turned to look at me, his gaze suddenly sharp, lucid. "She told me about the arrangement with your house," he said quietly. "The mortgage." My blood ran cold. I forced myself to take a sip of champagne I didn't want. "Did she?" "She said you were in a bad way, that you begged her for help." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "She can be very persuasive when she wants to be. She has a way of framing things so they seem like the only logical option." I said nothing. I just waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. The scent of his expensive scotch was sharp and peaty. "Just be careful, Amelia. The terms of that loan, she can be very strict. She doesn't like deviations from the plan, any plan." It was a warning, a cryptic, drunken, but genuine warning. From her own husband. Before I could respond, Eleanor's voice cut through the air, sharp as a whip crack. "Richard, darling, the Porters are here. Stop hiding by the bar and come be social." Richard flinched almost imperceptibly. He gave me a last, unreadable look, then pasted on a smooth, social smile and moved toward his wife. Eleanor's eyes flicked to me, cold and assessing, before she turned away, tucking her hand possessively into the crook of Richard's arm. The interaction left me deeply unsettled. Richard knew something. He was afraid of her. What had he meant the terms of that loan? Did he know more than he was saying? A few days later, the first break in our case came. Maria, Julian's paralegal, called me. She was breathless with excitement. "Amelia, we got it, the original mortgage agreement from the bank." "And?" I asked, clutching the phone so tightly my hand ached. "And your sister is a piece of work," Maria said, her voice crackling with vindication. "There was a massive prepayment penalty, $30,000. She paid it. She paid $30,000 of her own money to the bank to acquire your $225,000 debt." I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs giving way. She paid $30,000? Why would she do that?" "Because she's playing the long game," Maria said. "Think about it. She now owns a debt for which you are paying her interest. But more importantly, she owns the leverage. Julian thinks this is about more than just the money. The prepayment penalty is a cost she incurred. She didn't disclose it to you. That's a material fact. That's fraud. We can argue the entire contract is voidable because you entered into it under false pretenses. She presented it as a simple favor, a restructuring. She never told you she was buying the debt, and that it cost her a significant amount to do so. She misrepresented the transaction. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a terrifying picture. This wasn't just about controlling me. This was about my house. Why? And then I remembered. A conversation from years ago, not long after Tom and I had bought the place. Eleanor had come over for a rare visit. She'd stood on the porch, looking out at the big, old oak tree in the backyard. "This is a great lot," she'd said, her voice thoughtful. "A really great lot. The town is expanding the commuter rail line. The station is going to be a 10-minute walk from here. This whole area is going to be rezoned for mixed use. Property values are going to skyrocket." At the time, I'd just been pleased she liked it. Now her words took on a sinister new meaning. I called Julian immediately. "The rezoning?" I said, my voice trembling with a new kind of urgency. "The commuter rail. She's not just after the debt. She's after the property, the land." Julian was silent for a moment. "That makes a terrifying amount of sense," he said slowly. "If she can force you into default, foreclose, and take the property, she'd stand to make a fortune. She'd own a prime piece of soon-to-be redeveloped real estate that she acquired for pennies on the dollar. It's not just predatory, it's brilliant, in a completely evil way. The scope of her betrayal took my breath away. It was so cold, so calculated. She'd seen my grief, my desperation, not as a tragedy to be comforted, but as an opportunity to be exploited. She'd waited, like a spider in a web, for me to stumble into her trap. The game had changed. This was no longer about saving my home from a bad financial deal. This was about stopping a hostile takeover by my own flesh and blood. Julian laid out the strategy. We had to move carefully. We had the evidence of the undisclosed prepayment penalty. That was our first weapon. We would file a motion to have the debt agreement declared void based on fraud and undue influence. But filing that motion would be the equivalent of throwing a grenade into the middle of my family. There would be no going back. We decided to wait. To gather more evidence. Julian wanted to subpoena Eleanor's financial records, to see if there was a paper trail linking her acquisition of my debt to the planned rezoning. It was a long shot, but if we could prove she had prior knowledge and that this was a deliberate scheme, it would be devastating for her. The waiting was torture. I lived in a state of constant low-grade anxiety, jumping at every sound, every phone call. I was polite and placid with Eleanor on the surface, while inside I was a roiling volcano of rage and hurt. The next family event was Isabella's wedding shower. The wedding to end all weddings was fast approaching, and this was just one of a dozen prenuptial events. It was held at the country club, a place of manicured greens and whispered gossip. I brought a gift, a ridiculously expensive vase from a registry I could barely afford, and pasted on my best smile. Isabella, at 22, was a carbon copy of her mother at that age, beautiful, entitled, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. She held court, showing off her massive diamond engagement ring to a circle of admiring friends. I was standing with a group of aunts and cousins, trying to make small talk, when Isabella floated over to us, her arm linked with her fiancé, Bradley, a handsome, vacuous-looking young man from an equally wealthy family. "Aunt Amelia?" she said, her voice a perfect imitation of Eleanor's condescending tone. "I'm so glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from your work." She said the word work, as if it were a contagious disease. "Wouldn't miss it, Izzy," I said, my smile feeling like it was made of cracked glass. "It's just such a beautiful day," she sighed, looking around. "Everything is just perfect, exactly as I planned. Mother says a wedding is like a business transaction. Every detail has to be accounted for, no loose ends." Her eyes flicked to me. "No complications." Was I imagining the slight emphasis on the word? The subtle dig? One of my cousins, bless her, changed the subject. "The flowers are gorgeous, Izzy." "Aren't they?" Isabella gushed. "We're using the same florist for the wedding. It's going to be epic. Mother says it's an investment, a statement." "Of course," she added, her gaze drifting back to me. "We had to make some adjustments to the guest list. To keep it intimate, only the people who really matter, who are really part of the family's future." The message was as subtle as a brick. I was a loose end, a complication, not part of the family's future. I felt the heat of humiliation creep up my neck. I excused myself and fled to the ladies' room, locking myself in a stall and leaning my forehead against the cool metal door, taking deep, ragged breaths. This was my family. This was what they thought of me. I was a charity case, a problem to be managed, an embarrassment to be hidden away. The anger that had been simmering inside me for months finally reached its boiling point. It wasn't just hot rage anymore. It was cold, hard, absolute. They wanted to see a victim? They wanted to see a helpless little sister who couldn't fight back? Fine. But I wasn't going to fight with tears or accusations. I was going to fight with their own weapons. I was going to fight with paperwork, with contracts, with cold, hard, undeniable facts. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and went back out to the party. My smile was easier now. It was a mask of pleasantry, and behind it I was plotting their downfall. The wedding day itself dawned bright and clear, the kind of day weather reporters call perfect. I dressed with care. I chose a simple, elegant navy blue dress. It was understated, respectful. It was also the color of a deep, still ocean, hiding riptides beneath its surface. Chloe, now 12 and possessing a wisdom that broke my heart, looked at me as we got into the car. "You okay, Mom?" she asked softly. "I'm fine, sweetie," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's just a wedding." But we both knew it was so much more than that. It was a battlefield. The ceremony was held in a grand old church. I sat in a pew toward the back, watching it all unfold like a beautifully staged play. Isabella was radiant. Eleanor, giving her daughter away, was the picture of maternal pride and triumph. She had orchestrated this perfect day, this perfect merger of two powerful families. I felt a pang of something, not jealousy, but grief. Grief for the relationship we might have had. Grief for the sister who had once, long ago, helped me build a fort out of blankets and told me ghost stories. That sister was gone, if she had ever existed at all. The reception was at a historic estate on the North Shore. It was, as promised, epic. A massive white tent, dripping with fairy lights. A famous band. Ice sculptures. The air smelled of champagne, expensive perfume, and the salty tang of the sea. I found my assigned seat at a table on the periphery, right next to the kitchen doors, the place of honor for the poor relation. I didn't care. It gave me a perfect view of the action. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Eleanor stood up, glowing, to toast her daughter and new son-in-law. She spoke of legacy, of tradition, of the brilliant future they would build together. She never once looked in my direction. After the cake was cut, the dancing began. I saw Isabella, her face flushed with champagne and happiness, weaving through the tables with her new husband. She was working the room like a pro, accepting congratulations. She reached my table. Her smile didn't falter, but it didn't reach her eyes either. "Aunt Amelia," she said, her voice bright and brittle, "I'm so glad you came." "It was a beautiful ceremony, Izzy," I said, my own voice equally bright, equally false. "Congratulations." "Thank you," she said. She leaned in, as if to give me a perfunctory hug, but instead of hugging me, she put her lips close to my ear. The room was loud, the music pounding. No one else could hear her. Her whisper was like a shard of ice sliding into my heart. "You're not welcome here." I froze. The words were so quiet, so venomous, they barely registered at first. She pulled back, her smile still perfectly in place for anyone watching. She gave a little laugh, as if she'd just shared a delightful secret with me, and then she moved on to the next table, leaving me standing there in the thunderous noise of the party, feeling like I'd just been shot. The words echoed in my head, drowning out the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses. "You're not welcome here." It was the final confirmation. The mask had finally, completely, dropped. I was an outsider, a stain on their perfect day, a problem to be tolerated, but not embraced. I felt the cold anger from the shower solidify into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. I looked across the tent. I saw Eleanor laughing, surrounded by admirers, the queen of her castle. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second, and in that look, I saw it all. Not malice, not even hatred. Just dismissal. I was already gone. I was already nothing. I smiled. It was a real smile this time, the first real smile I'd felt all day. Because she had no idea. She had no idea that her own daughter had just handed me the final piece of motivation I needed. She had no idea that the documents were already filed, that Julian had served her lawyers with the motion this very morning, while she was busy putting on her mother of the bride hat. She had no idea that the first wave of my revenge was already in motion. I made my way through the crowd, heading toward the bar. I needed to look like I was getting a drink. What I really needed was a moment to steady my nerves, to let the plan crystallize in my mind. As I walked, I passed a group of Eleanor's friends, powerful women with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. I heard my name. "Amelia looks well," one of them said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. It must be such a relief for Eleanor, not having to worry about her anymore. I heard she practically owns her house now. Such a saint, that Eleanor. "A saint with a killer instinct," another woman laughed. I heard she got the debt for a song. The property is worth a fortune now with the rezoning. Smartest thing she's ever done. I kept walking, my head high, their words washing over me. They knew. Everyone in their circle knew. It was a business deal to them, a savvy investment. My grief, my loss, was just a line item on a balance sheet. I reached the bar and ordered a mineral water. As I stood there, waiting, I felt a hand on my elbow. It was Richard. He looked more haggard than ever, his tuxedo seeming to hang on him. "Amelia," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need to talk to you." "What is it, Richard?" I asked, my voice calm. He glanced around nervously. "It's Eleanor. She got some papers today. From a lawyer. A Julian Croft." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh?" "She's furious," he whispered. "Absolutely nuclear. She's in the library with her attorneys right now. She's talking about accelerating the debt, foreclosing immediately. She says she's going to crush you." So she knew. The battle had begun. "Let her try," I said softly. Richard looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like fear in his eyes. "Not for me. Of me. Amelia, you don't understand what you're dealing with. She will destroy you. She'll take your house. She'll take everything." "She already took everything, Richard," I said, my voice flat. "She took my trust. She took my sister. There's nothing left for her to take." "There's always something left," he said grimly. "Just be careful." He melted back into the crowd, a ghost in a haunted mansion. The band took a break. The DJ started up, playing something upbeat and modern. The dance floor filled again. I saw my chance. I walked toward the head table, where Eleanor was now sitting, surrounded by her inner circle. She was speaking intently into her phone, her face a thundercloud. She saw me approaching and ended the call abruptly, her eyes narrowing. "Amelia," she said, her voice a warning. "This is not the time." "I just wanted to congratulate the happy couple again," I said, my voice dripping with sweetness. I turned to Bradley, Isabella's new husband. He looked pleasantly drunk. "Bradley, the speech was wonderful. You're a very lucky man." "Thanks, Aunt Amelia," he said, slurring slightly. "It must be such a relief," I continued, "to have all the financials sorted out before the wedding. Prenups, property. It's so important to be clear about these things from the start. Don't you think, Eleanor?" Eleanor's face went very still. "What are you talking about, Amelia?" "Oh, just that it's so wise to have everything in writing," I said, my tone light, conversational. "To know exactly what you're getting into. To understand all the terms. Like, for instance, if someone were to help you out with a mortgage, it would be so important to know if they'd paid a $30,000 prepayment penalty to do it, wouldn't it? Just so you have all the information. Full disclosure." The color drained from Eleanor's face. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped backwards with a screech. The people around us fell silent. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Don't I?" I said, meeting her gaze squarely. "I've been reading a lot lately. Contracts can be so fascinating, all those little clauses, all those hidden details." Isabella, who had been listening, looked confused. "Mother? What is she talking about? What prepayment penalty?" Eleanor didn't take her eyes off me. "It's nothing, darling. Your aunt is confused. She's had too much to drink." "I'm perfectly sober," I said calmly. "I'm just finally starting to see things clearly. It's amazing what you can find when you actually bother to read the fine print." I could see the calculations going on behind Eleanor's eyes. The fury, the shock that her little mouse of a sister was not just squeaking, but roaring. She took a step toward me, and for a terrifying second, I thought she might actually strike me. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "I will make sure you have nothing. Not a roof over your head, not a penny to your name. You and your daughter will be out on the street." The threat, uttered aloud, in the middle of her daughter's wedding, was so shocking, so brutally honest, that the small circle around us gasped. It was the opening I needed. "Speaking of roofs over heads," I said, my voice rising so others could hear. "That reminds me. I found the most interesting thing the other day, Eleanor, going through some of Dad's old papers." I had her attention now, everyone's attention. "What are you babbling about?" she snapped. "The trust," I said. "The Charles Sterling family trust. The one he set up for his grandchildren." A muscle in her jaw twitched. "What about it?" "Well, it's just a funny thing," I said, feigning confusion. "The language is very specific. It states that the principle of the trust is to be divided equally among his biological grandchildren upon the death of the last surviving child. That's you and me, Elle." "I'm aware of the terms of the trust," she said coldly. "So?" "So it defines biological grandchildren as the direct lineal descendants of Charles Sterling's blood children. It's very clear. There's no provision for adoption." The air went out of the room. Eleanor stared at me, her face a frozen mask. Isabella looked from her mother to me, her confusion deepening. "What is she talking about, Mother?" Isabella asked again, her voice edged with panic now. Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. I delivered the final blow, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the now silent table. "It's just, I always wondered, Eleanor, why you and Richard never adopted Isabella officially. You brought her home from the orphanage in Russia when she was a baby. You've raised her as your own, but you never finalized the adoption in U.S. courts. It was always just a private guardianship, a foster placement, technically. I found the paperwork. Dad's trust lawyer confirmed it. According to the terms of Dad's trust, Isabella isn't a biological grandchild." The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the Persian rug. Isabella's face was a picture of dawning horror. "Mother, is that true? Tell me she's lying." Eleanor found her voice, but it was strangled. "She's lying. She's a bitter, jealous woman who is trying to destroy your day." "Am I?" said. I reached into the small clutch purse I was carrying. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a copy of the trust document, with the relevant section highlighted. I also pulled out a copy of the guardianship papers for one Anya Petrova, now known as Isabella Sterling Vance. It's all right here. The trust is worth, $4.2 million? And it all goes to Chloe, the only biological grandchild. The gasp that went around the table was like a tidal wave. Isabella stared at the papers, her hands trembling. She looked at Eleanor, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You told me I was your heir. You told me everything was mine. You let me believe." "It is yours, darling," Eleanor cried, reaching for her. "It's a technicality. I'll fix it. I'll get the lawyers." "You knew!" Isabella shrieked, tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup dissolving into streaks. "You knew, and you never told me. All my life. I'm not even really your daughter?" The scene was unraveling into pure chaos. Guests were staring. Bradley looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Richard had his head in his hands. Eleanor turned on me, her eyes blazing with pure, undiluted hatred. "You vicious bitch," she spat. "You ruin everything you touch." "No, Eleanor," I said, my voice quiet but carrying an iron certainty. "You did this. You did all of this. You were so greedy for my house, you forgot to cover your own tracks. You were so sure I was too stupid to fight back. You never thought I'd look into your past. You wanted to take everything from me? Well, now you know what it feels like." I turned to leave, the stunned silence of the wedding party ringing in my ears. I had done it. I had torn down her perfect world in the middle of her perfect day. But as I walked away, I knew it wasn't over. This was just the first strike. The legal battle would be long and ugly. But I had the truth on my side. And for the first time since Tom died, I had fight left in me. I found Chloe waiting for me by the car, her eyes wide. "Mom? What happened in there? Everyone is talking." I put my arm around her and pulled her close. "The truth happened, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with emotion. And sometimes the truth is the most powerful revenge of all. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The wedding, of course, was ruined. Isabella left in tears with her new husband, a rift between her and Eleanor that I knew would take years, if ever, to heal. The gossip spread through our social circle like wildfire. Eleanor Sterling Vance, the pillar of the community, was revealed to be a fraud who had cheated her own sister and lied to her own daughter. The legal proceedings became a public spectacle. Julian was a pit bull in the courtroom. He eviscerated Eleanor's high-priced lawyers. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she had zero tolerance for familial theft, took a dim view of Eleanor's actions. The debt agreement was declared void due to fraud and undue influence. The title to my house was cleared, free and clear. The mortgage was gone. But the judge didn't stop there. Citing Eleanor's egregious breach of fiduciary duty and familial trust, she awarded me punitive damages. She ordered Eleanor to pay me the $30,000 prepayment penalty, plus all my legal fees, plus an additional $100,000 for emotional distress. It wasn't about the money. It was about the judgment. It was a public declaration that she was wrong, that I had been wronged. The final blow came from an unexpected source, Richard. He filed for divorce, and in the divorce proceedings, he revealed everything. He testified that Eleanor had boasted about her plan to acquire my property, calling it a sure thing. He provided emails, financial records, everything. He was done being her silent partner. Eleanor was left financially bruised, socially ostracized, and utterly alone. The community that had once revered her now pitied her or despised her. Her own daughter wouldn't speak to her. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My victory was in the peace I found, in the safety of my home, in the knowledge that I had fought for myself and for my daughter, and I had won. Chloe and I planted a new tree in the backyard, a sapling to replace the old oak that had been damaged in a storm. It was a symbol of new growth, of a new beginning. I thought about Tom a lot during that time. I knew he would have been proud of me, not for the revenge, but for the strength, for finding the load-bearing walls within myself and learning how to stand firm. One afternoon, a few months after the court case had ended, I was painting on the back porch. The light was perfect. I was working on a seascape, trying to capture the way the light danced on the water. A car pulled into the driveway. It was a car I didn't recognize. A woman got out. She was young, dressed in a simple sundress. It was Isabella. My heart ached for her. Despite everything her mother had done, she was a victim in all of this too. She walked up to the porch, her steps hesitant. "Aunt Amelia?" she said softly. "Izzy," I said, putting down my brush. "Would you like to come in? I have iced tea." She shook her head. "No, I can't stay long." She took a deep breath. "I'm leaving. Bradley and I, we're moving to California. He got a job offer." "I see," I said. "I came to say, I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "For what I said to you at the wedding. It was cruel, and I didn't know." "I know you didn't, Izzy," I said. "You were just repeating what you'd been taught." "She lied to me," she said, her voice breaking. "She lied about everything, who I was, who she was." She looked at me, her expression raw and vulnerable. Were we ever a family, or was it all just a transaction? I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about Christmases past, about birthday parties, about summer vacations. "I think there was love there, Izzy," I said finally. "I really do. But for your mother, love always had conditions. It always came with a price tag. And some of us could never afford the asking price." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm trying to forgive her, but I don't know if I can." "You don't have to," I said. "Not right away, maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't for her, it's for you, and it takes time." She looked at my painting. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." She turned to go, then stopped. "The trust money," she said. "Chloe's money. I don't want it. It was never mine." "It's yours if you want it, Izzy," I said. "You were raised as his granddaughter. In his heart, you were." She gave me a sad smile. "No, I'm not a Sterling, and I think I'm finally okay with that." I watched her drive away, a young woman trying to build a new identity out of the rubble of the old one. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Her road would be hard. But my road was finally clear. I sold the house, not to a developer, but to a young family with 2 little girls who fell in love with the big backyard and the porch. They reminded me of us, of me and Tom and Chloe all those years ago. It felt right. With the money from the sale and the settlement from Eleanor, Chloe and I moved. We went to the coast of Maine, to a small town where no one knew the name Sterling. We bought a little cottage with a view of the ocean. It was quiet. It was peaceful. I set up a studio in the spare room, and I painted. I painted the sea in all its moods. I painted my grief. I painted my anger. And eventually, I started to paint my hope. Chloe thrived. She made friends. She joined the soccer team. She started to talk about college. She was going to be okay. We were both going to be okay. The past didn't disappear. The hurt didn't magically vanish. But it lost its power over me. I had faced the monster, and I had won not by becoming a monster myself, but by finally finding my own strength. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. It's about reclaiming the power they took from you. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing, truly knowing, that you are not who they said you were. You are not weak. You are not a victim. You are a survivor. And you have the right to fight for your peace. My story is a reminder that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest. But it's also a reminder that you are stronger than you know, that you can weather any storm, that you can rebuild from any wreckage. If you're listening to this, and you're in the middle of your own storm, hold on, dig deep, find your strength, read the fine print, and never, ever let them see you cry until you're ready to use those tears to put out their fire. This is my story. This is my revenge. And my life, my peace, is the ultimate payoff. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find your own strength in the face of betrayal, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because everyone has a story. And sharing them, hearing them, is how we remind each other that we're not alone, and that no matter how dark it gets, the dawn is always waiting. Thanks for listening.